The desert wind carried a copper taste that evening, sharp as iron filings on the tongue, and Elias Crowe knew trouble had found its way into the valley again. He rode with his hat pulled low, the sun bleeding red along the horizon behind him, his eyes fixed on the plume of dust rising crooked from the flats. The sound reached him before the sight sharpened. Horses screaming, wood splintering, the hard crack of gunfire echoing against the mesas. A stagecoach, no doubt, and not the first to be hit along this stretch of road. He pressed his heels into the flanks of his roan and leaned forward, rifle already slung in his hands. Each hoofbeat jolted up his bones, rattling in time with his pulse. The air smelled of dust and cordite by the time he crested the ridge. Below, the stage lay tilted, one wheel busted clean through, the driver sprawled lifeless across the bench. 3 riders circled like wolves, faces half-mast, pistols flashing in the dying light. Another passenger tried to crawl from the wreck, only to be kicked down into the dirt. Elias didn't waste words or breath. He sighted along the rifle, squeezed, and one rider pitched backward with a strangled cry. The others spun, startled. The second shot scattered them, and then his horse was charging down the slope, gravel spitting out beneath pounding hooves. Bullets tore the air near his ears, but he rode straight, firing steady as stone. By the time he reached the wreck, only one outlaw remained, galloping off into the horizon, cloak snapping behind like a coward's flag. Elias swung down, boots sinking into the churned dust. The stench of gunpowder clung low, bitter as old smoke. He scanned the wreck quickly. 2 passengers dead, one groaning but alive, another woman pinned beneath the twisted door. Her dress was ripped and muddied, one sleeve soaked with blood. A horse, panicked and crazed, had caught its harness on the wheel and was dragging the frame sideways, jerking her body with each frantic pull. Elias lunged, his knife flashing. He cut the straps, shoved the beast back, then wedged his shoulder under the splintered frame. With a grunt, he heaved until the timber gave enough slack for her to crawl. She tumbled forward, coughing, face streaked with grime. He caught her by the arms, steadied her upright. She looked up at him then, wide-eyed, chest heaving. Her features were sharp but not delicate. Freckles burned clear beneath the dirt, and her hair, once neatly pinned, had fallen loose in copper waves. She winced, clutching at her leg, yet forced a crooked smile. "Reckon that's not the warm welcome a lady expects," she rasped, voice rough but steady. "You're alive," Elias said simply. He glanced at the wound, superficial but messy, then swept his gaze across the road again. The other survivor had staggered to his feet and limped off toward the shadows. Elias let him go. His concern stayed on the woman. She tested her leg, leaning heavy on him. "Stage was bound for your town, wasn't it? Ashford Crossing." He gave a short nod, keeping his arm around her waist until her balance held. "Name's Elias Crowe." Her expression shifted. Something unreadable flickered in her eyes. "Crowe," she repeated, almost tasting the word. "I know that name. You're the one sent for a bride." His jaw tightened, uncertain how she meant it. "That's true." "Well," she said, breathless, laughter catching on the edge of pain, "you got one. Just not the one you ordered." Elias frowned. "What do you mean?" "My sister was meant for you," she said, biting down as she straightened. "Clara. She was the one promised. But she changed her mind last minute, decided she wasn't ready. So I stepped onto that carriage instead. Juniper Hayes, at your service." Elias blinked, his silence heavy as the dust settling around them. He'd imagined Clara, had read her letters, the neat script describing sunsets and a fondness for lilacs. Now here was Juniper, standing in her place, bloodied and half-smiling like the chaos hadn't rattled her one bit. "You came in her stead?" "Somebody had to," she said. "Couldn't let a man down after he went to the trouble of ordering love like a sack of flour." Her eyes glimmered with mischief even as her knees trembled. "Besides, Clara would have fainted dead away if she'd been here tonight. I've always been the tougher one." The wind carried their words off into the empty plain. Elias studied her without speaking, the grit of the world still buzzing in his ears. This was not the arrangement he'd signed for, Yet here she was, alive because he'd acted quick, and alive perhaps because she was bold enough to claim her sister's place. He guided her toward his horse, boosting her carefully into the saddle despite her protests that she could mount herself. She hissed at the pain in her leg, but settled firm, gripping the horn with white knuckles. Elias climbed up behind, steadying her with one arm as he wheeled the roan toward home. The sun had dropped fully now, leaving the land in a wash of indigo and silver. Coyotes yipped distantly, their cries swallowed by the hush of wide desert night. Juniper shifted, uncomfortable at the closeness. "You don't say much, do you?" "No need," he said. She gave a soft laugh, though it trembled. "You'll have to, if we're to make this work. Marriage takes more than silence and steady aim." Elias didn't answer. His mind ran elsewhere, circling the strange twist of fate, the weight of responsibility, and the faint sting of disappointment he refused to show. Yet he felt her lean, just slightly, against him, worn out by shock and pain, and he held the reins steady for them both. The ride stretched long, the prairie whispering around them, stars piercing through velvet dark. Now and again Juniper muttered, snatches of humor, scraps of thought, as though filling the silence by sheer will. She cursed the ruined dress, cursed the bandits, cursed her sister's fine handwriting that had lured her into this tangle. But under the rough words was steel, and Elias found himself listening closer than he intended. At last the ranch lights came into view, flickering yellow against the night. The house stood plain, a squat silhouette of timber and stone, with corrals stretching dark behind. It was no palace, no dream stitched from letters, but it was solid, enduring. Juniper exhaled when she saw it. "Home sweet, something," she murmured, the corner of her mouth twitching. Elias dismounted first, then helped her down. Her legs nearly gave, and he caught her again, steady as an oak. For a moment they stayed close, her breath warm against his collar, his arm tight around her waist. Then she pulled back, straightening, pride tugging her spine upright. She met his eyes square, dirt and blood not dimming the spark there. "So, Mr. Crowe," she said, voice firmer now, "you were expecting Clara. You got Juniper, and I reckon that's the way of things. Take it or leave it." Elias searched her face, reading past the bravado, past the exhaustion. He saw a woman carrying more than tonight's wounds, a woman who had chosen to step into danger rather than watch another bear it. He gave a single nod. "Then Juniper it is." The night folded around them, the silence heavy but not empty. The ruined stage lay miles behind, Carrion already circling. Ahead, the ranch waited with its own questions. Between those 2 points in the narrow thread of starlight, a bond had already begun to stitch, ragged but real. And though the danger had passed for now, Elias knew the echoes of gunfire would not be the last. The door to the ranch house groaned on its hinges when Elias pushed it open, letting the desert night spill inside with them. The air smelled faintly of lamp oil and old cedar. Juniper paused on the threshold, one hand braced on the frame, as if crossing into his world required a moment of courage. Her dress was torn at the hem and spattered with dust, her hair catching firelight like copper threads as she stepped into the dim glow. Elias guided her to a chair by the hearth before striking a match to coax the flames higher. The room warmed slowly, shadows curling back to reveal simple things. A long table scarred from years of use, shelves lined with tin dishes, a rifle propped against the wall. Elias crouched before the hearth, his broad shoulders flickering in the glow, and she realized how alone he must have been here. No softness in the corners, no trace of laughter lingering in the beams. Just wood, stone, and the quiet patience of a man used to keeping himself company. He fetched a basin, filled it with water from a pitcher, and set it beside her. Without asking, he knelt and reached for her leg. She flinched but didn't pull away as his rough hands rolled the fabric up past her knee. The wound looked worse than it was, skin scraped raw, blood dried in jagged streaks. His touch was gentle, though, fingers steady as he cleaned the grit from it. She bit her lip, determined not to hiss, though her eyes watered. "You've done this before," she said softly, searching his face. He tied the bandage firm, knotting it neat. "Plenty of work out here tears a man open. You learn." She tilted her head, a small smile creeping. "I'd wager you patch livestock the same way." He glanced up deadpan. "Stock don't complain as much." Her laugh cracked the silence, surprising both of them. He looked back down quickly, as though wary of how it sounded inside his house. She settled against the chair, letting the warmth from the fire ease her trembling. When he rose, she noticed his hands lingered an instant at her ankle, almost reluctant to let go. From a pot left on the stove, he ladled out stew thick with beans and venison. He set a bowl in front of her, another for himself, and sat across the table. They ate in quiet at first, the only sound the scrape of spoons. The broth was smoky, heavy with salt. She studied him between bites, the hard lines of his jaw, the streak of gray already threading his dark hair, the way he seemed carved more than grown. "You always eat like this?" she asked. "Like what?" In silence. "Like the food's a job that needs doing." He shrugged, chewing slow. "Depends who's at the table." Her mouth tugged into a grin. "Then you're in luck. I can talk enough for two." And she did. She spoke of the journey west, the rattling windows of the carriage, the nervous chatter of fellow passengers before the ambush. She filled the room with words, weaving humor through even the darker moments. Elias mostly listened, his eyes steady, only now and then offering a dry comment that made her laugh harder. By the time the bowls were empty, her shoulders had loosened, and the silence between them had changed shape. It no longer pressed heavy but stretched soft like cloth draped over sharp edges. Later, she insisted on helping with the evening chores. He tried to argue her into resting, but she brushed him off and limped toward the barn. Under the lantern's yellow sway, she attempted to milk the cow, determined despite the beast's suspicious glare. The bucket clattered over more than once, milk splashing across her skirt, her hands slipping clumsily. She cursed under her breath, hair falling in her face, until Elias finally stepped in. "You're squeezing like you mean to strangle it," he said, taking her hands to guide them. His fingers over hers were rough, warm, steady. Gentle. Think of it like coaxing, not taking. Her laughter bubbled, unsteady but bright. "You make it sound like courting." His eyes flicked to hers, sharp, unreadable. Then he let go, stepping back. She continued more carefully, cheeks flushed though the air was cool. By the end, she'd managed enough to cover the bottom of the bucket, proud as though she'd struck gold. Back at the house, she sat on the porch while Elias checked the corrals. The night stretched vast around them, stars spilling across the sky in bright rivers. Coyotes yipped far off, and the wood creaked gently beneath her boots. She hugged her arms close, shivering not from cold, but from the enormity of the land. When he returned, she spoke without looking at him. "I wasn't supposed to be here," she said quietly. "Clara was the one promised. She's the pretty one, the proper one." She had the letters, the plan, the ribbon in her hair. But when a moment came, she couldn't do it. So I took her place. Elias leaned against the post, arms folded. "Why?" Juniper's gaze stayed fixed on the stars. "Because I couldn't watch her be forced into something she feared. And because I'm used to being the one who takes the fall. Ever since we were girls. If trouble's coming, it seems to find me first. I thought maybe for once I could choose it." The wind shifted, carrying the smell of sage and smoke. Elias studied her profile in the starlight, the stubborn lift of her chin, the soft tremor of her mouth. He understood more in that silence than words could spell. "You regret it?" he asked. She turned to him, eyes glinting. "Not yet." They lingered there, the hush between them deep but not empty. A moth battered itself against the lantern. Somewhere in the distance, a horse snorted restless. Elias finally pushed off the post. "Get some sleep," he said. "You'll need it come morning." She rose slowly, testing her leg. At the door, she paused, glancing back at him. "You don't make this easy, Elias Crowe. But maybe that's the point." He gave no answer, only a nod. She stepped inside, leaving him beneath the wide, endless sky. He watched the horizon a while longer, unsettled by how quickly her presence had threaded itself into the fabric of his home. When he finally turned in, the house felt different. The silence was no longer his alone. It carried her laughter still, faint but echoing. He lay awake, listening to the creak of the rafters, to the soft shift of another human breathing in the next room. And though he told himself it was too soon to feel anything at all, he couldn't shake the sense that something had shifted tonight, something that would not be easily undone. Dawn cracked pale across the plains, the sky streaked lavender and gold, the air sharp with dew and wood smoke. Elias had been awake long before the first rooster called, moving through the barn with the practiced rhythm of habit. He forked hay into the stalls, checked the water troughs, and worked as though nothing in his life had shifted. Yet when he turned, he found Juniper standing at the doorway, hair braided loose, her skirt brushed free of dust. She leaned on the frame, her bandaged legs stiff but her smile quick, and for a moment she looked as though she'd always belonged here, as though the land had been waiting for her shape against the light. "You work like the sun's chasing you," she said, stepping inside. "It always is," he replied. She picked up a small pail and made for the chicken coop, despite his glance of warning. Inside, the hens scattered at her presence, wings flapping, feathers drifting like snow in the shafts of morning light. She reached for one, and it darted away, clucking mad fury. Within minutes, she was crouched low, her hair falling loose again, her skirt snagged on a nail, while the chickens mocked her from every corner. She cursed, lunged, missed, cursed louder. Elias leaned on the fence, silent as a stone, until she finally managed to grab one by sheer stubborn will. She held it aloft, triumphant, feathers sticking to her brow. "See? Perfectly under control," she said, breathless. "Looks that way," he murmured, though his mouth tugged faintly at the edge. When the chores wound down, they carried their buckets back to the porch. Elias sat sharpening a knife while Juniper rubbed at her sore knee, watching him work. The rasp of stone on steel filled the quiet until she broke it. "You're wondering why I really came," she said. He looked up, but did not answer. "Clara couldn't stomach the idea," Juniper went on. "Marrying a man she'd never met. Father arranged it. Said it was the best thing for the family. Said you were decent, hard-working, own land. Said she'd be safe here. She cried the night before the carriage left. Said she felt like cattle being sold." Juniper's voice softened. "She begged me not to make her go, so I went instead." Elias's jaw worked. He set the knife down carefully, as though his hands had gone heavier. "And what did you want?" She hesitated, fingers picking at the hem of her skirt. "I wanted her free of it, and I suppose I wanted to see if I could be something more than the sister always left behind. Clara shines. Folks love her easy. I was the shadow, so when the chance came, I took her place. Foolish or not." The words sat between them, fragile as spun glass. Elias studied her, the steady weight of his gaze, unflinching. She shifted, uncomfortable under it, then tried to deflect with a grin. "Besides, I figured if you didn't like me, you could always send me back postage due." His eyes narrowed, though the corner of his mouth twitched. "Not the way this works." Her laugh carried, though the undercurrent of truth hummed sharp. The day stretched long. She helped mend a fence, her fingers blistering on the hammer. She fetched water, cooked beans over the stove, cursed when she burned her hand. Elias watched her shoulders square against each failure, her spirit refusing to bow. Yet sometimes he caught her still, gaze distant, eyes clouded with something unsaid. It was near dusk when the rider came. Dust rose behind him as he cut hard across the plain, a lean figure on a black horse. Elias stepped off the porch, hand on his rifle, while Juniper stiffened beside him. The man pulled up short, sweat streaking his face, breath ragged. "Crow," he shouted. "Word from town. Harlan's men are hunting. They say you stole what belonged to him. He's swearing you'll pay for it." Juniper's breath caught. The name struck her like a stone. She gripped the porch rail, knuckles whitening. Elias glanced at her, sharp. "Who is Harlan?" he asked. Her lips parted, then pressed shut. She shook her head once, as if to deny the sound, but the rider spat the truth. "Cattle baron. Owns near half the valley. Mean as a rattler and twice as venomous. Said a woman promised to him ran off, and he means to have her back, no matter the cost." The silence that followed was taut as wire. The rider tipped his hat nervously and spurred off, leaving dust hanging in the air like smoke. Elias turned slowly to Juniper. "You knew this," he said, voice low. Her chest rose, fell. She nodded, trembling only slightly. Clara was meant for him. Father promised her, "Not to you, not truly." She hated him, Elias. She said he scared her down to the bone. So I took her place. I thought if I could vanish, Harlan would let her be. And now he thinks I stole what's his. Her eyes flashed. I'm not his. I was never his. No woman is. Elias studied her with that same unyielding calm, though inside, heat burned through him. He saw the scars beneath her stubbornness, the weight she'd carried alone. He knew Harlan by reputation, ruthless, grasping, never denied. And he knew trouble would ride this way soon. "You should leave," he said at last. "Find safety elsewhere." Juniper shook her head fiercely. "No, I've run enough for one lifetime. If I go back, he'll find me. If I stay, at least I'm not alone." The wind picked up, carrying the smell of dust and the distant promise of rain. Elias's gaze stayed on her, hard as stone, searching for any crack in her resolve. But she held, chin high, fire in her eyes. As night fell, thunder rumbled far off. Elias sat on the porch with his rifle across his knees, the storm rolling closer, shadows gathering along the horizon. Juniper lingered beside him, restless, words tumbling soft. "Funny, isn't it?" she said. "You ordered a bride. You got me. A woman with trouble at her heels, a man like Harlan sniffing after. Worst bargain you ever made." Elias didn't look at her. Maybe not. She blinked, startled, then smiled faintly into the dark. The storm clouds massed thick above, flashes of lightning carving the land in silver. Somewhere in that distance, a gunshot cracked, faint but real. They both heard it, their eyes meeting across the flicker of lantern light. Neither spoke again. The storm would break soon, and with it, so would everything else. The storm broke at sundown, thunder rolling over the plains like cannon fire. Rain sheeted across the ranch, drumming against the roof, slicking the corrals into mud. Elias stood on the porch, rifle in hand, his eyes narrowed against the flashes of lightning. Juniper hovered near the doorway, her arms wrapped tight around herself, though she refused to retreat into the safety of the house. Both knew this was the night. Hooves churned the earth before they saw the riders. Lanterns bobbed in the dark like fiery eyes, a dozen men following the lead of one broad figure, cloaked in oilskin. Harlan reined up before the gate, rain dripping from the brim of his hat, his voice carrying cruel and clear through the storm. "Crow," he bellowed, "you've got something that belongs to me. Send her out, and I'll let you keep the rest of your miserable life." Elias's jaw tightened. He raised a rifle, but his words cut sharper than the barrel. "No woman belongs to you, Harlan. Not now, not ever." A ripple of laughter came from the riders, though it was edged with unease. Harlan spurred closer, his horse stamping and snorting against the mud. Lightning carved his face into a mask of arrogance, eyes glinting with hunger. "She was promised," Harlan snarled. "Your little farmhand there stole what's mine. I'll have her back, or I'll burn this place to the ground with both of you inside." Juniper stepped forward before Elias could stop her, rain plastering her hair against her cheeks, her chin lifted. "You think you can own a woman the way you own cattle," she called, her voice sharp and ringing. "But I'm no heifer in your pens. I came here by choice, and I'll not go back to you. Not now, not ever." Her defiance silenced even the storm for a moment. Then Harlan's fury snapped like a whip. He raised his arm, and the men surged forward, guns flashing. Elias fired the first shot, the crack splitting the night. A rider tumbled from his saddle, and chaos erupted. Rain blinded, mud swallowed boots, and fire spat from the barrels. Elias moved with grim precision, each shot placed, each breath steady. Beside him, Juniper hurled a lantern toward the barn, the glass shattering in a bloom of flame. The sudden blaze roared high, scattering horses and men alike, smoke and rain colliding in a choking haze. Harlan cursed, driving his men harder, but fear had taken root. Two fled into the night. Another fell screaming, trampled by his own mount. Elias took a graze along his arm, hot blood searing down his sleeve, but he did not falter. Then Harlan himself pushed through the firelight, pistol raised, his horse rearing. He dismounted with a thud and stalked toward the porch, boots sinking deep. Elias met him halfway, steel against steel, rifle against revolver. They circled in the rain, two predators locked in the same cage. "You think she'll thank you for dying in her place?" Harlan sneered, his teeth flashing in the stormlight. "She doesn't need me to die," Elias growled, "just to stand." The words struck true, for Juniper's voice cut in, fierce despite the quaver in it. "You'll not take what isn't yours, Harlan. Not me, not this land, not him." Harlan lunged, and the world shrank to gunmetal and thunder. His shot went wide, smothered by the rain. Elias's rifle cracked, but the blow only winged him, blood streaking his coat. They grappled in the mud, fists in fury, until Harlan broke free and seized Juniper by the arm. She cried out, twisting his grip like iron. He dragged her close, pressing the pistol beneath her chin. "One more step, Crow, and I'll end her." Elias froze, chest heaving, eyes locked on hers. The storm raged around them, lightning flaring, but in that moment everything narrowed to her trembling breath and his steady resolve. Juniper's gaze burned through the fear. She met Elias's eyes, gave the faintest shake of her head. Then she acted. With a sudden surge, she drove her knee into Harlan's gut, wrenched his wrist, and spat words sharp as glass. "You don't own me." The pistol jolted free, clattering to the mud. Elias seized a chance, striking hard, sending Harlan sprawling. The Baron scrambled, mud streaking his face, reaching for the gun. Juniper was quicker. She snatched it up, hands shaking, and leveled it at him. For a heartbeat, the storm hushed, every sound swallowed in her decision. Harlan laughed, cruel and breathless. "You haven't got it in you." Her hand steadied. "I've got more than you think." The shot cracked, thunder swallowing a hole. Harlan's body slumped, the rain already washing his blood into the dirt. Silence fell heavy. The riders who remained scattered like shadows, spurred by the sight of their master undone. The flames of the barn hissed under the downpour, smoke twisting into the black sky. Juniper stood trembling, the pistol lowering slowly from her grasp. Elias stepped to her side, bloodied but unbowed, and took the weapon gently from her hands. She sagged against him, breath ragged, and he steadied her with one arm. "It's done," he said. She closed her eyes, letting the storm wash over her, the rain mingling with the tears she would not name. When she opened them again, she found his gaze steady, not pitying but proud. Together, they moved back to the porch, collapsing onto the steps as the rain eased to a drizzle. Smoke curled from the wreck of the barn, the land smelling of wet earth and iron. Elias tore a strip from his shirt, binding the cut along his arm while Juniper leaned beside him, exhaustion dragging her head onto his shoulder. "You're bleeding," she murmured. "So are you," he answered. They laughed then, quiet and broken, but real. The dawn crept slow, clouds shredding to reveal a pale gold horizon. When the first light touched the ranch, it found them still side by side, worn but unyielding. Juniper lifted her head, her voice husky but sure. "Guess you're stuck with the wrong sister after all." Elias looked at her, the corner of his mouth curving into something rare. Maybe the right one. They sat in silence, watching the sun climb, the land stretching endless before them. Around the edges of their weariness flickered the shape of something new, fragile but alive, as if the storm had scoured away everything false and left only what mattered. The world was harsh, cruel, vast, yet here in this moment the air was warm, the ground steady, and the future possible. Juniper reached for his hand, their fingers lacing slow. Elias did not pull away. The camera of the sky widened, catching them as two small figures on a porch, smoke curling behind, the horizon blazing ahead. A story closed, another just beginning, and the land, indifferent but eternal, bore witness as the storm gave way to quiet, and quiet gave way to something like hope.